This is the Evanston Plan Commission. We were waiting for several members who are not yet here, but we do have a quorum. It is 9 minutes after 7, so we should start. The first item of business is approval or non-approval of the minutes of May 14th, 2014. Is there a motion or corrections? No, no one says anything. There is a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The minutes are approved unanimously. That brings us to the first item of new business, which is a map amendment to the zoning ordinance involving property at 1409 Dodge Avenue and 1825 Greenwood Street. 14 PLND 0043. We customarily start with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first case in front of us tonight is the proposed rezoning at 1409 Dodge and 1825 Greenwood Street. The petitioner is requesting to rezone the property from I-2 General Industrial to R4 General Residential. The property is here on the slide, the overhead view. It's at the northeast corner of Dodge and Greenwood Street. And Greenwood Street does not go through to Dodge. There's a cul-de-sac there, and here's the property. The property consists basically of two lots, two addresses. The southern portion is 1825 Greenwood Street, the single-family home, and then the old automobile repair shop with the address of 1409 Dodge is in the northern section of the lot. The property is approximately 7,542 square feet in area, and it is currently vacant. Here's the zoning area. I'm sorry, the zoning map for the area. Property is indicated here in the middle of the map. It's outlined in gray, so it's industrial I-2. The properties to the north and east are zone R3, which is two-family residential district. The property to the south is also zoned industrial I-2, and it's currently approved with a two-story multi-tenant office building. The property to the west is zone R4, and it's a vacant, single-family type of home or structure that was previously used as a contractor's office. And then here's the proposed map that indicates basically the property being rezoned to R4. The petitioner is basically proposing to construct 3 dwelling units on the property. The existing single-family home would be converted or renovated to include an attached garage, and it would be a single-family home. The former automobile shop that's on the northern edge of the property, indicated here on the plat of survey, would be a second floor added to that, and that structure would be converted to a duplex. So there will be 3 dwelling units on the property, and therefore the petitioner is requesting for an R4 zoning classification, which is for multifamily properties. I do have slides of the proposed improvements. Because the petitioner is looking to modify the existing structures which are currently non-conforming and do not meet the bulk restrictions, the petitioner will need several zoning variations from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the petition for the zoning variations is scheduled for July 1st. Of this year, so next month. Again, the proposal tonight is just the discussion for the rezoning. This is the previous shot. This is the single-family home. This is the first floor with the attached garage with the access to Dodge. This would be the proposed second floor for the home. And then this is the old automobile repair shop. On the left would be the proposed first floor plan. This is the dividing wall between the one unit and the second unit with the one car attached garage in each. And then the second floor addition is on the right. Staff believes that the proposed rezoning from I-2 to the R4 is appropriate as a transitional density buffer between the residential uses, the R3 uses to the north and east, and more intense uses to the south and to the southwest. There are other R4 zoning districts on the east side of Dodge. Over time, these sort of transitional multifamily uses have been established along the old railroad corridor that initially used to have only industrial and commercial uses, but as you can see, some residential uses have popped up and zoning districts have popped up over time on the east side of the old corridor. We believe that the standards for approval of the rezoning have been satisfied. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The proposed rezoning would enhance the neighborhood asset by providing an appropriate buffer between the said uses. It would also provide a range of housing choices to the area residents, and it's overall really compatible with the surrounding neighborhood character because the use on the property would be one single-family dwelling and then a two-family dwelling rather than a one multifamily structure. So it suits well to the surrounding uses and one and two single-family dwellings. We don't believe that the proposal would negatively affect surrounding properties. As a matter of fact, we believe that the proposal would increase the values of surrounding properties by eliminating the old automobile repair shop, which was sort of a detriment to the surrounding area. And the proposal will be adequately served by public utilities. So just to summarize, staff is recommending approval of the proposal. This was presented to the zoning committee at their May 21st meeting. Several residents came in and spoke, inquired about the units that are being proposed there, if they're going to be low income. The petitioners here tonight can testify to that. I believe the units will be market rate. So the zoning committee forwarded a positive recommendation to the Plan Commission at their last month's meeting.
Is there any comments or discussion or questions from the members of the commission? Go ahead.
I wasn't at the zoning committee meeting. It's a positive recommendation, but were there other issues raised that were resolved or not resolved?
There were no issues whatsoever. There was just a discussion about the proposal in terms of...
Other than the income question?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that if you go back to your first slide, the one with the new, no, the one with the new layout. Okay, the lot appears to be narrow. And then you have about, I think, 14 feet in front of the garage. Well, maybe the developer can answer that, right? Which is where usually cars are parked. So you don't have access from the alley. So which means everybody will have to enter from Dodge, which is a busy street already, and you're putting 2 more units in there, right? How is that going to impact? Because you have to reverse back into Dodge, right?
Correct. So basically, just to summarize, again, the proposal is for the rezoning only. These types of issues about proposed access and all that stuff will be reviewed by Spark and the Zoning Board of Appeals. But to summarize, this property, this would be the southern lot. This is the single-family home right now, and this is the proposed addition of a garage with obviously 2 cars in there. I'm not sure if there's 18 feet here, which is a typical width or length or a stall that would be required if somebody wanted to pull in and just park there. And then this is so this would remain a single-family home. The old automobile repair shop that's currently 1-story structure would become a 2-story structure with 2 units there. And again, the proposal is currently to have access to Dodge to individual 1-car garages. The proposal went to the Spark review today, and those issues were brought up by members of the Spark committee. There were a number of ideas that were proposed to possibly, there's an alley here on the north side, to possibly have access from the alley and then kind of loop into the individual units. And then also there was a discussion about possibly having access off of the cul-de-sac here of Greenwood Street, and maybe bringing this garage closer to the front, and then having sort of a front-loading garage off of Greenwood so that there's really no access on Dodge. So those things are really what Spark Committee is for and the ZBA, and they reviewed a number of variances for that. And I think the ultimate proposal for the single-family and the two-family dwelling that's still sort of in design by the architect and the applicant.
Okay, so that's my first question. That's what I wanted some clarification on. And I think you also alluded that the garage is basically going, and in its place will be the two townhomes, right?
Correct, on the north lot, yes.
Okay, which would be, so that footprint, so the new townhome will basically occupy the existing footprint. That's
Correct.
it, right? Okay. Now, if you were to come in from the cul-de-sac where Greenwood ends, then how would you do that? Would you have both cars parked right at the end of the cul-de-sac?
So it would only be applicable for the single-family property. So this is a survey that's sort of sideways. North is to the left, Dodge is right here. This is the single-family home. This hatched area is all concrete right now. Currently, there's access off of Dodge into the shop. So the applicant is proposing to add this two-car garage with access to Dodge. The discussion today was to convert access from Greenwood just for the single-family home by bringing the garage in. For the two-unit building on the north lot, the idea was to use the alley that's north of the site to bring in the driveways for the individual garages.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess here's the thing. I think the proposed improvement, I think, will be very helpful to that neighborhood. The only issue becomes, I think, parking and somebody reversing back onto Dodge Street. That is the only problem. But I think there is no doubt that this will be an improvement to that site. But parking, though, and also that alley, I don't know if you've driven in that alley.
Pretty narrow.
It's pretty narrow, so I don't think you can make that cut right into this place. But with all that said, I think it will definitely be an improvement for that site, for the parking.
Any other comments? I would not agree that we lack jurisdiction, but in this case, as a practical matter, it goes to the zoning board for specific consideration of access and before it goes to the council so they can handle this part. It certainly looks to me like this is the appropriate use for this site is residential, given the surrounding uses. So I would recommend approving to. Is there discussion from any visitors or comments? Does the applicant have any comments? You don't have to, but you can. Could you identify yourself for the record?
Yep. Good evening. My name's Tom Heskin.
Mr. Heskin, do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Just in reference to Mr. Steele's question, I just wanted to add into what Mr. Letanovic has already mentioned, is that there's also the possibility of putting a, as you may want to call a carport in front of each of the two townhomes. So instead of having to back out onto Dodge, they could back out into a carport, which would allow them to do a 90-degree turn on the property and then pull out onto Dodge in a forward fashion if by chance the radius wasn't appropriate to pull into the alley. So that's a possibility that would be considered as well.
This is just a question for an inquiring mind.
Okay.
Across the street from this place is Smitty's.
Right.
right? And then you have that home that is overgrown, and like a contractor, a roofer's office or something like that. Will this sell? Because these are not rental; these are for sale.
Correct.
Will this sell?
Due to the fact that down Greenwood, there are nice homes, so I think by continuing what is on Greenwood, westward, I think it'd be appropriate for the neighborhood, and I believe it'll sell.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If there are no questions or comments, are there motions? Is there a motion? Or does anyone wish to move something? Go ahead.
It fits. I mean, I think it would be a significant improvement for the neighborhood. The only concern is the parking, but I think it will definitely improve the site, and it will make that extension. As it is, it's bordered up with plywood everywhere.
Right.
So this would definitely be 100% improvement to the site. And I move that at least, if the parking issues could be really tackled seriously, I move that this be allowed to proceed to the next step.
Probably that will present a complication that will be hard to interpret, because the council won't know what it means to clear it up.
That was only my concern. So,
I think it might be better to move approval and ask that the report contain your concern and questions.
I think that's definitely acceptable. Yeah.
So there's a motion for approval, and with a report that raises questions relating to parking. Is there a second? Second. Are there any comments? You look ready to.
No, I don't have any problems with the parking situation as you do it. Prior to this, looked like there were like 4 or 5 cars. Right. I mean, right now, there are 4 or 5 cars parked there that have to back out, so
But
I would prefer the motion be made clean without.
He accepted the amendment.
Yeah, but you do understand that it's a garage now.
Yes.
And you do understand that when you have a garage, the rules are different, because the former garage owner, I think at one time, parked cars all over the front of the garage. So the rules are different. Now it becomes a residential, and chances are once you actually built, the footprint will expand a little bit. Do you concede that much? Because based on what was shown, the garage is not wide.
Okay, we could just move on.
Okay. Hearing no further comments, seeing no hands, all those in favor?
Aye.
The commission has unanimously recommended approval, and the only condition is that the report should contain the concern about parking. The staff addressed the standards. Let me ask the board if they accept the standards, the comments on the standards given by the staff. Let me ask the staff one question. I think you didn't address the adequacy of public facilities and services. Are there adequate public facilities and services? Maybe you did say it.
Right. We do believe that public utilities are adequate for the proposed development and for the area.
Public facilities, did you say?
Utilities and facilities, I'm sorry.
Great. Then we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a text amendment 14 PLND 0044 regarding notice requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the second case in front of us tonight is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to modify the public hearing notice requirements for zoning applications. This is another case that was presented to the zoning committee last month with a positive recommendation. Just to summarize the proposal, this was brought up by staff in response to something that we've noticed, and that's that the required notices are not consistently and clearly outlined in the zoning ordinance for different types of zoning applications, such as special uses, variances, plan developments, and these types of text amendments. Staff has always done the same type of notices, and that's a notice in the newspaper between 15 and 30 days before the hearing. We've also notified surrounding property owners within a certain distance by regular mail, and then we've also posted a sign on the property. And so the proposed text amendment is to clarify exact language all across the board for those types of applications. The second part of the amendment is to clarify that for any continued hearings, the second notice is not required. And again, that's nothing new. That's the practice currently. This text amendment just clarifies that. During the prior to the zoning committee meeting, some of the members of the zoning committee, including you, Chairman, we've received some feedback in terms of some suggestions for improvement to the text amendment, and based on our legal counsel, we've tried to incorporate as many of those as we were able to. And so the ordinance is presented in the report. Again, the idea is not to change anything, just to clarify the current standards. So without further complication, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have passed out an additional 2 sentences, which I will read into the record. And my concern is that we have notice mailed out and posted and published, and then at the meeting, there isn't a quorum. And that allows someone to argue that there was no initial meeting that can be continued. The cases in Illinois do not specifically address it, but in fact, if you have a defect in notice, then the action that's taken may be invalid, so it becomes an important question. I suggest the addition of the 2 sentences to the portion of the ordinance that legal counsel believes is appropriate, perhaps the notice portion, and the 2 sentences, I'll just read them into the record. In the event a quorum is not present for the initial meeting or continued meeting, a majority of the board or commission members present may reschedule the meeting to a new date and time. No additional mailed or public notices shall be required for meetings continued as provided in this paragraph. I think it's pretty clear, given the past practices and the practices of most of the cities where I've observed this kind of problem, that republishing and sending out, mailing out new notices is not useful. It's burdensome, causes delays, and this is designed to remedy that problem, allowing a majority of those who are present to reschedule the meeting, and specifically saying you don't have to send additional notice. When I discussed this with Mr. Ford, he said it was addressed by Robert's rules, and that's true. I looked at the rules you gave me, but I think it would be stronger to express it as part of an ordinance. It's not something we want to litigate. Having researched it, some states come out differently than.
And just to clarify, the current practice would be if there is no quorum, we would just reschedule to the next regularly scheduled meeting, and we would republish the notices and everything. This provision would allow staff that we, may reschedule, may publish if necessary once those present at the meeting.
You can always republish.
Right.
The question is, do you have to? That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I would move your language as an amendment to the staff's recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. That passes unanimously. Is there a motion on the staff's proposed text amendment?
I move approval of the staff text amendment recommendations.
Is there a second?
Second.
For discussion? Any discussion? I'd like to commend the staff. It's really well drafted, and you've addressed some very subtle issues in the current ordinance. It's really nicely done. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And you guys have voted aye. That passes unanimously as amended. Our next item is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance 14 PLND 0045. And this has to do with some districts. Does the staff have a report on this?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another text amendment, this case to amend the list of permitted and special uses in business districts, specifically relating to office and financial institutions. This case was again presented to the zoning committee at their May 21st meeting. So the B districts, here's a map of the city of Evanston with the B districts. There are 4, B1, B1A, B2, and B3. These districts were originally established as sort of neighborhood nodes to service the surrounding neighborhoods with immediate sort of daily commercial needs. The physical character of these districts is the buildings built at a front lot lines, so more of a pedestrian character. And the type of uses that you would typically see here are corner convenience stores, restaurants, cleaners, and those kind of uses. However, recently we've seen an influx of office uses into these districts, such as banks, accounting offices, other financial institutions like H&R Block or Title Loans offices that do not necessarily cater just to the surrounding area, but draw up from the entire city, so from a larger area. So they sort of do not strive on the pedestrian environment, and that has resulted in a lack of general retail uses in those districts. So staff was approached by certain business owners in these districts to do something to encourage retail uses and to limit some of these office uses. So our proposal, as outlined in the memo and based on the input from the zoning committee, is to designate office and financial institution uses which are currently by right permitted uses throughout the B districts, to allow them on the first floor only as a special use, and then on the floors above the ground level to allow them as a special use. On the ground floor as a special use, on the floors above as a by right permitted use, as is the practice right now. Initially, staff did not include the B3 district along Howard Street, east of Ridge, because we felt that district was a little bit different than the rest of the B districts. But based on some further review and based on the input from the zoning committee, we did include the B3 district in this amendment. And that's, in essence, based on the most recent trend of development along Howard Street, with some of the uses that cater more to the pedestrians and to the surrounding area. So in a nutshell, that's the proposal by staff. We do believe that standards have been satisfied for this text amendment. This is consistent with the general comprehensive plan of the city, and the plan's call for action to encourage new uses that complement existing neighborhoods. Since one of the things that was brought up at the zoning committee was to notify all property owners whose properties were zoned B district. That, based on our legal counsel, seemed to be a little bit burdensome. There's really a lot of properties to do that, and it would set a really bad precedent, considering that we do these text amendments a lot, where we amend all residential uses or all commercial uses, and that would include a lot of City of Evanston. So instead, we've reached out to the Economic Development Department to notify the merchant associations in these business districts, and we've done so with the help of Economic Development Department. And following that notice, we did receive several letters of support. One of them was in the packet that was mailed out on Friday, but since then, we did receive 3 other emails of support, and I placed those on the dais for you tonight. So with that, staff recommends approval of the proposed text amendment, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Are there any questions, or is there any discussion from members of the board?
Question.
Mr. Ford?
Now then, what then is the legal status of the existing uses? Are they now legally non-conforming?
Correct. There was a paragraph in the memo that talked about the non-conforming uses. So any existing established office uses that are on the ground floors would become now special uses. So they are legal non-conforming uses, which means that they can continue forever in their current configuration. As a matter of fact, if they move out per code, the property owners have 1 year to reestablish those types of uses again without any further approval necessary. If, however, that type of use wants to expand, then a special use would be required.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Are there any? Go ahead.
What are we, by making it a special use, given the comments that some of the people, some of the emails that we received, what consideration, I guess, has been given to the impact that it may have on, spaces just being vacant just because there's no businesses, retail businesses that are going in on the first floor, and some of the buildings. The reason why I asked that question is because I live in the neighborhood, and I try to frequent, some of the businesses there. But it is kind of there's a lot to be desired in terms of, what can go there. And I stopped in one day and spoke to the owner of Corrado Cupboard. And he and I we had a chat, and he had just kind of commented about, there just isn't a whole lot drawing people, to that area. And I guess my concern is that I understand, I'm in support of having retail on the first floor. But if there isn't an outside demand to come in there, what is the purpose of changing the zoning to restrict some of the, an office use on the first floor? I just don't see that there's really any other, I don't see the demand for retail existing that's creating this tension in use, which is really the rationale for changing zoning. Am I missing something?
No, that's some of the debates that we've had internally of what to do. Based on the feedback that we've seen from the area business owners, they have indicated that there's a dead zone based on these office uses and property owners looking to lease out to more stable sort of financial institutions rather than other retail establishments that may be prone to more turnover. But in effect, it's ultimately based on the feedback that we've received from the business community. It's really not our own assumption. It's literally from the business community who have been there for 15, 20 years in some instances in those businesses, and they've mentioned to us that this is becoming a problem there. The office uses are just kind of taking over some of these spaces. Now, because of that, because of the concern that you indicated, we're just proposing as a special use, not to outright allow them. So if there is a problem with vacancy, then I'm sure if there is a business office that's going there, the city council would certainly approve that. So
It's a fairly common principle that the office uses kill the retail. What the tipping point is, we don't have definitive studies. Would be done. I'm really glad they left the special use so we don't end up with units that simply can't be used for any purpose. I think that's a real concern.
But I think, Commissioner Sorrow raises a real concern here that this works, this is useful in a situation in which there is competition for a particular piece of space between a retail and a non-retail use. Then this is okay. But it doesn't provide, in and of itself, any incentive for a retail use to come in. And if we're not somewhere else addressing the incentive problem, then the principle here is good, but I'm not sure that the real impact is going to be all that great. I mean, I live fairly close to the commercial area around Central and Lincolnwood up in there, and it's full of banks and real estate and everybody else. And I just noticed today that a retail space had gone vacant, gone out of business. And if the choice is between having that sit vacant and having a small brokerage come in, seems to me the brokerage may unfortunately be the answer, much as we would rather have real retail in there.
But as Scott pointed out, it's not banning those.
I'm not opposing the proposal, but it seems to me it's way less than perfect. This is the less bad of several options.
Well, I would be curious as to what staff or anyone else might recommend would be an improvement on it that would keep us within the norms of zoning law. I can't think of anything, but to my mind, the goals of this are very laudable, and if it does nothing except prevent further retail turnover for office use, then I will be content enough. I think many of these areas should be occupied with the kinds of uses that serve that specific neighborhood. And many of these businesses, as staff has mentioned, bring in clientele from outside of the neighborhood that then park in that area, use the facility, and leave and have no vested interest in the neighborhood or the retail in that area. So, and these businesses do not activate the street as effectively as a retail establishment or a restaurant. And there is, and as I recall, some discussion in the zoning committee, it would, making it a special use will not prevent those kinds of uses. But in certain situations, it might suggest that they go up to a second floor or not locate there at all. But by virtue of having the special use, the best judgment can be made at that point in time. And that will then, I would presume, address the market conditions that are prevalent at that time.
Any other discussion?
I agree with the comments that have been made. I agree with Commissioner Galloway and Ford. I support the concept. I guess the point I was trying to make was we've heard from businesses, and I support the businesses and would like to see more businesses, but what impact would that have on the owners of the property at the end of the day who have to generate income in order to continue to own and operate the property? I mean, that is an issue. I think if you're an office and you're looking at this particular area and there isn't a whole lot and you see Main Street and you see a space, if you have to actually apply and go through the process of getting a special use, even though it will probably get approved. It is to some extent a barrier to entry. It's not insurmountable. So that's all I'm saying, that I support it. I will reiterate until I'm blue in the face, and I had mentioned it before in relation to the development at the south, and Demir probably knows where I'm going, the development at the southeast corner, when we had a couple of hearings. I still don't understand and have never gotten any response from the alderman or anybody else, and it's not pointing any fingers, I'm not blaming anybody, as to why there isn't any consideration given to using some of the TIF in order to do a parking structure at a location that has a dual Metra and CTA station. I just don't understand it. I would hope that somebody looks into it, because if you can get parking, as Commissioner Galloway said, if people come in, that's when they'll come to the businesses. People within Evanston, people outside of Evanston, people are still need a reason, or they need convenience to come to that particular area. And it doesn't have the kind of parking that is needed for a dense area. That will help the businesses in that area. And the TIF, by the reason why I mentioned the TIF, is because the TIF has designated a substantial amount of money to go towards parking. I didn't decide it, the city council decided it.
I think if staff does not fight consideration of those ideas, they will be considered. And I'm glad you urge consideration, because it's absolutely essential, if that's going to be a residential neighborhood retail area, not residential, neighborhood retail area, that the parking be there, both for commercial uses on the second floor and retail uses on the first floor. Both this area and other areas where there's stations in South Evanston, it needs to be addressed. And bigger problem than this amendment that really needs to be looked at. I would agree with you. With respect to the return for landlords, of course, I always applaud a return for landlords. But one of the purposes of zoning is to ensure uses that are appropriate in an area. And I don't know why we would want to make this a banking area, for example, or an area where there's no retail in the middle of a residential area on a strip with no parking.
But it hasn't happened thus far.
Well, that's what
Without the change in
this is designed to discourage it. I mean, it doesn't seem to me this is an appropriate area for that kind of development, and that's why I support the proposal. Mr. Ford,
No, I was just,
you look ready to talk. You didn't wave your arm, but
no,
anyone else?
Yeah, as it is written, I don't see it as being restrictive. I think if it turns the way I see it, or the way it is written, I think if a location were to be vacant for a long period of time, I think through special use, an approval could be sought to put that site. But I guess, Chairman Peters, I go back to Mr. Zostek's email, and I think that is what I have a hard time each time I sit here. If a question is asked, sometimes I think we tend to hear, well, this is not the purview of this particular committee. But Zostek raises some questions here, and some of the questions are basically, how do we attract, as a city, people to that particular strip? Mr. Ansaro has talked about parking, but several months ago, we okayed a development that didn't have sufficient parking. But let's park that aside. How can we help that strip from Custer, I think it's 1 block south of Custer, to Main Street, and then heading all the way to Sherman, where Vogue is? Does the city have any plans to actually increase the flow or attract more, more stores that will actually help, the place start to bustle a bit.
If you want, we can attach a comment to any recommendation saying this, making the area more attractive for retail needs to be addressed.
Chairman Peters, I'm fine with the way it is written because I think I think it's fair as the way it's proposed. But I just think Mr. Zostek's question somebody need to really look at that. How do you help?
I think we're in agreement. The board is. I see all the heads nodding. Yeah, even Mr. Ford agrees. And unanimous head nodding. Put that in the record.
Said pass.
Is there a motion? Yeah. Absolutely. Please come.
Everybody is unanimously voting here.
Please come forward. We have someone shaking a head no. Can you come forward? Identify yourself. Will you tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Identify yourself.
I'm David Roberts. I am a business owner in Evanston and a property owner in Evanston at 1319, 1321 Emerson Street. It's a B1 district.
Please.
So I've got some observations, some comments, and some questions.
That would be great.
Okay. And I'm here, can't speak for anybody else, but I can't imagine I'm alone on some of the things I'm going to share with you. However, I guess I am alone because, and I was not happy to hear that it was too burdensome an effort to contact people like myself that own property and have property that they occupy and operate businesses in my case, a B1 district. So I was really disappointed to hear that that's a burdensome task. I think is how you stated it. Burdensome was the word.
Just to clarify, it's not burdensome. It was determined that it would set a bad precedent, considering that we do a lot of text amendments for similar type of uses for a lot of other
You
uses.
used the word burdensome. I didn't use the word. I'm just
true.
repeating the word.
Go ahead.
My point is that there might be a lot more people in this audience tonight, and maybe there would have been more emails if more people like myself had become aware of this. Fortunately, with some of my involvement within the city, someone told me about it. I would have been here earlier in May at the zoning meeting. I was out of town, and I didn't even know about it at that time. So I'm here tonight. But I am disappointed that the city takes a viewpoint that it's difficult somehow to contact people that are listed. I've seen the spreadsheet listing all the businesses in my area because I contact them and talk to them regularly as part of our growing merchant association there. All right, so that's just a point that I think I needed to make because I do think there would be more people here speaking like me tonight. So I'm here on two behalfs. One as a business owner in Evanston. I was born in Evanston, raised in Evanston. And as a property owner in Evanston. I've owned the property, I should say, at Emerson, on Emerson since 2004, so 10 years. We had our anniversary there in February. And so here's one of my questions. Is an architecture and construction company, a yoga studio, and massage therapist, would those be restricted under special use categories?
So the architect's office, yes. I would have to look at the list of uses. If they are specifically listed in there, then they're singled out. We would proceed with that. If they're not listed, we look to specifically yoga studio and the massage therapy establishment. We would look to classify that towards something that's the most similarly described use within that zoning district.
How about the construction company?
Most likely not.
Okay. All right, so the things that are now occupying my building, I own the building, I've had tenants there, and have spent, in the last 10 years, I've spent $500,000, over $500,000, investing in that property alone, building it, improving it, remodeling it, bringing it up. It's an 1890s Myron Hunt building. It was built originally as a school, not as a commercial property. And I've spent a lot of time and energy converting that into what I think is a very nice building. And all my neighbors have suggested that, my business neighbors and my residential neighbors, that what we have done there is to revitalize that neighborhood in a very positive way. I spent the past couple days, I couldn't spend all my time doing it, but I sat in our front conference room, which is in the front window, so I could watch the foot traffic go by, to the comment about foot traffic. And today, I counted 45 people that walked past my window and walked into my building to do all sorts of things, yoga, massage therapy, come to see me. So the argument that foot traffic is not related to office use, I think is a fallacy. I think that's something that might be being kicked up by, and I don't know who, it was mentioned that a group of some business owners have gotten behind this making this special use category. And I don't know how many people that represents. I don't know if that's a very specific area, if it's on Central Street or Main Street or on Howard, or one of the many wonderful areas that we have in our town. Each one of those areas is unique and has a different kind of a flavor, which makes Evanston the place that it is. I think where we are on Emerson has its own flavor, and it's an emerging flavor. One of my great neighbors is a funeral parlor. I'm not sure if, and he's been there for 50 years. I'm not sure if he would be a special use. Maybe somebody could share that. Alderman Baptiste's office, he's not there now since he became a judge, but his office in the building that he owns would have had to have been a special use. The NAACP office in the next block for me would have had to have been a special use. Hecky's Barbecue, which is just down the street, restaurants qualify, so he'd be okay. The other thing, I walked up and down the street today just to make sure I got an accurate count, and I saw that there are four vacant storefronts, and just between me going east to Green Bay Road to Hecky's. So in that 2 blocks, it's 2 blocks. Fire station's across the street if you're not sure where that is. There's 4 vacant storefronts, and then there are, on the second floors of the old Masonic Temple, that building's vacant. The whole building's vacant, so create whatever number you want there. But I guess I would, wonder, in the hopes that I have that other people will come and invest in the neighborhood as I have, if they see further restrictions and special use, and while it may be, somebody said, a slam dunk, I don't think it is. I don't think it is a slam dunk, and I think that somebody coming into Evanston at an entry level of a business sees special use, and while they might not be in the know about how easy that is, and nobody's going to say to them, don't worry about it, it's a slam dunk, because I don't think anybody in the economic development building is going to use those words, because they can't say that. They can't stick their necks out that far to tell somebody that. While you may know that, nobody else does. And the outsider, who we never will know about, because they'll see special use, I think I'll go to Wilmette or Skokie or Glenview or something like that. We don't know that. I think some of the notions of that were kicked around here today are maybe anecdotal and maybe not based on fact. So my business, and now I'm talking as the business person, has been in Evanston for 10 years. I was in downtown Evanston for years before that in a second floor office space. We're architects and contractors. We design and build things for people all the time. I've done that since I did the one at the corner of Ewing and Payne when I was still in college in 1970. So I've always worked here. But specifically, the B1 point that I'm trying to make here is that, and at the moment, I'm working with Evanston residents out of my office on, just gotta look at my notes here, right at the moment, we're working on Evanston Homes, $1.6 million worth of construction right now, today, spread out over town. Some of them are neighbors that walked down from Wesley, right around the corner from me in my B1 district, walked over to my store and said, would you come and work for us over there? So that seems to me to be a retail business of sorts. Big retail, bigger numbers. It's more than a pack of gum. It's more than cigarettes or soda pop, but it's retail business. Okay, so the 1.6 million, I broke that down. Where am I spending? Okay, that's coming into my company. Where am I spending that money? I'm spending it at Bob Fisher's Evanston Lumber. They've been over there on Sherman since the 1940s. I'm spending it at Hanson Roofing. They've been there as long as my dad was around Evanston, so I don't know how long. That's a long time ago. I'm spending that money at the Office Depot on Green Bay Road, keeping my office supplied with the stuff we need to get the work done. I'm spending it at the Home Depot in Oakton. I'm spending it with Cook Electric. I could go on and on. Greenleaf Cabinets, Tom Martin, he's over there on Greenleaf in Florence. If you're not understanding my point is local businesses are operating maybe on larger ticket retails that people don't see and understand it the same as they see it. But maybe this is about sales revenue. I mean, is that what this is about? Keeping offices out because they don't contribute sales revenue? That seems to me to be like an
This is not
underlying...
about sales revenue.
Okay.
This is about, as I understand it, this is about trying to have retail. And at some point, if you don't have, there's a tipping point. When if you have enough offices, you don't get retail users.
But is everything office and retail? Is that all there is?
But you are suggesting, as I hear it, that maybe the classification needs to be looked at. And the description that you've made of your area is really different than the description of some of the neighborhood retail areas such as Main Street. So I hear a question of how to achieve the purpose of making the retail work without killing the other users. I mean, that's what I hear from and
Yes.
I hear your description of the neighborhood being really different than the neighborhood, people sending these letters and perhaps other origins of this proposal. I don't think anyone wants to drive you away.
No? Okay. They're just telling me I can't do business where I'm doing business.
Wait,
And I understand that.
Can I interject?
Yes.
This particular proposal is not designed to affect existing businesses
I understand
or
that part.
uses.
I understand that.
They will be legal.
I got my
They'll-
free pass.
Right.
I'm okay.
Well, they'd be legal nonconforming. And the practical matter is that if somebody is looking at a space, say for example in a property that you own, and let's say that they fall under this particular scenario where they are not retail and they would need a special use. What's going to happen is they're going to approach you as the owner, and you are going to say, well, I'm just letting you know I'm in this B district, and your particular use is a special use. There are other similar types of uses like yours in this particular area. What you're going to need to do is, and then you're going to tell them. And that person then is going to come to City Hall, and they're going to be told And this particular city and their departments and their staff work really, really hard. Having sat on this commission for the number of years I've been sitting on it, I can tell you firsthand that they work really hard. So someone's going to go in, they're going to be told, they're going to be explained in detail what they need to do. And it's not a daunting process. And then, let me finish.
I understand.
Then what they're going to do is they're going to contact their alderman, and they're going to file the application, and they're going to send the notices. And if the alderman is in support of it, you as the property owner are in support of it, and they send the notices, and if it's the type of use that doesn't, create any objections, which it probably won't, because I'm pretty sure that that particular business owner and you will have a pretty good idea of what's going to be permitted or not, then they will be granted, more likely than not, a special use. I can tell you this from experience because I'm a zoning attorney, and I have presented special uses in cities. And so it is not a under the radar process. It's not the most complicated process, but that's essentially what would happen with someone who is in the situation that you described. So there's no intent at all to discourage it. The whole purpose behind it is to regulate uses. The planning department has a very difficult job, and that is to foresee uses, to direct uses, and they have to work essentially with what we have in existing uses and what they can forecast or believe would be in the best interest of the city. So I hope I have addressed your point on that. The other thing is that I agree with your point, and that's kind of reason why I raise it. I don't think all office uses are necessarily incompatible with some retail uses. I'm in agreement with you. I think you summarized it really well, the impact of what happens when people come down the street, because the kind of office uses we're talking about aren't, like your, what I think people consider to be like an office use. I mean, it creates foot traffic. And then just the point on the notice, we hear map amendments, we have to consider these things all the time. If you really are serious about requiring the city of Evanston to send notices to property owners in districts when we have map and text amendments, then be prepared to have to spend more money, because it costs money to do that. And we have to make zoning recommendations all the time. And when it comes to amendments and things like that, that's how the city runs and that's how it operates. There's absolutely no intent to try to put something over on somebody. Everything is published on the website. If people want to know what's going on with the work that we're doing, it's available. But it's not feasible to send notice for map and text amendments.
Just so
for the
you
work that
know,
we do.
if it's a map amendment, everyone within 250 feet gets notice. Sometimes under our ordinance, more than 250, and that doesn't include the right-of-ways, 250 plus the right-of-ways. If it's a text amendment, it affects people all over the city, and for some of them, we'd have to send a letter to everyone in the city. So the statute, our ordinance says notice for map amendments, no notice for text amendments. And when, I usually reject the precedent argument. Personally, it doesn't seem logical to me. But I don't think it's feasible to do text amendment.
And I didn't come, in my notes prepared that I had prepared, I didn't come here to talk about.
But I'm just trying to tell you the rationale.
I appreciate everything everybody has said, and as an architect, I present to zoning boards all the time. I understand how that works. I also understand that when you present to a zoning board, there's no certainty of anything. It depends on lots of things, having a good attorney to represent but it represents. My issue came with the word burdensome, frankly. I think that was a poor choice of words. I took that in the most negative way I could have. I realize that. I came here with my, up to here, having heard that with my blood a little boiling. But I think that's a poor choice of words, because burdensome can be taken in lots of different ways. So I was here because I got a notice. Okay, so I've got a couple more points if I could.
Please.
Thank you. So when I moved into that district, it was as my neighbors have said, Mr. Halliburton, who's been there for a long time and has become a good friend of mine, he said this was a lifeless place. And there was no pun intended. He runs a funeral parlor. Maybe he did intend that. I don't know, because he's a pretty funny guy. But it's drive by there now. There's yoga classes going on. There's probably cars parked up and down and bicycles all over the place. And being yoga people, they walk there. Okay, so there's lots of traffic. It's wonderful. We were talking about it the other day compared to 10 years ago. I could have stood out in the middle of the street. Nobody would have noticed it. There's all sorts of traffic there. I'm happy, I'm proud that maybe I played a part in that, in bringing that building to life. I changed the above apartments into offices, and we created a space where there's lots of activity. That's important in all parts of the city. Bear with me, I'm just... having read the notice and then having heard the comments earlier, I can't help but think that some part of this ordinance text amendment is being directed by a small group of business owners. I understand their concerns. I'm a business owner too. But I think it might be generated from particular parts of that map, and there might be more sensitivity to looking at things as they really are instead of kind of painting the town with one brush from end to end. You know, the Greenleaf District is different than the Emerson District, is different than Church and Dodge, is different than all the other places. I think this is a broad brush. And my last point, and thank you for bearing with me, is I think that office versus retail is an old and simplistic way of looking at zoning. I think that our economy is no longer just divided like that. There's a service piece that has to be addressed in the middle of that. Maybe that's where I drop my business into, as a service piece. Yeah, I sit in an office, but our office has lots of things going on. That's just one thing going on. An interior decorator might be in an office, but is directing lots of activity in a very local way. I only work Evanston up to Glencoe. That's as far as I go, and almost 85% of our work is in Evanston. So it's a very local thing. It's a service economy is different than a retail economy, is different than an office and bank. So much of this reads to me to be trying to address banking issues. But oops, we better not just talk about banks, because we might get in trouble if we only address one slice, so let's just make it offices, and banks fall in there neatly. I'm just saying that. That's how it looks from the outside looking in.
Mr. Ford?
Mr. Chairman, it does seem to me that there's the grain here of uses gets pretty fine. I'm looking again at my neighborhood. Evanston First Evanston, whichever bank that is. 2 real estate offices, a couple of brokerages, and then Harold's Hardware and a cleaner and ice cream and a shoe repair and a bunch of mixed, what we would call retail. Now, my guess is that that bank generates as much foot traffic as the shoe repair does. My guess is that the real estate businesses generate a lot less, that real estate agents go out to do their work rather than people coming to them. My guess is that the brokerages generate less foot traffic, so that if what we're interested in here is foot traffic, and I agree that that is, all of the things being equal, foot traffic is to be desired. And I don't particularly care whether it's local traffic or people driving in, I want people on the street. Partly because it increases the likelihood that having stopped in one place, they will stop in another place. But we may need to think about this. I think the point that a straightforward retail versus office distinction is too crude. I don't know whether this is the appropriate time in our lives to do this, but we may really want to look at how we classify uses. If we're interested in density of foot traffic, then that may be another way of slicing the uses, and that we need to pay attention to that. If there's no burning issue to which this proposal responds, I'd be tempted to propose that we sit on this one for a little while and think about it.
I will only add, we have the question of classification of uses, but as I look at the map, the subject area that this affects, they're not all the same.
Exactly. Yeah, I think this district in Emerson and Green Bay is way different from Central and Lincolnwood.
And maybe we need to reconsider something a little more fine-grained.
I think so.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've made some good, very good points.
Appreciate you listening to me tonight. Thanks very much for your attention.
Don't go, we're not done. I mean, you don't just stand there, but don't run away yet.
No, I think your points are very well taken.
Okay.
And I think I agree with Mr. Ford. There are certain businesses that do activate the street and do serve the neighborhood, and there are others that are just simply storefronts, for something that happens that nobody ever sees. And it's quite obvious that the kind of uses that you put in your building are strong attributes for that neighborhood. And I think this ordinance needs to address the activation element perhaps more than the broad-based use definition. Because if I was sitting on the zoning board and you, as the owner of your present business, let's assume you would have to, you lost one of your tenants and so forth, and a year passed and you came in and you had to come before us for a special use. I would be very surprised if you didn't get it, given your past track record and the amount of service that your tenants provide that neighborhood. So I'm very appreciative of what you had to say, that this really helps provide a much better perspective for this, because there are certain B1 districts and there are other certain B1 districts.
It's a complicated town, and that's a good thing. As I said at the beginning, I can't speak for anyone else, but I couldn't imagine that I was the only person feeling this. So I felt compelled to come forward, talk tonight.
Other comments?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'd like to say thanks for the eloquence with which you put forth your presentation. It raised a lot of issues that I think ought to be addressed, and I agree with what Commissioner Ford and also where Chairman Peters is leaning, that there's so much variance that this really ought to be thought through so that you are not incumbent in the future.
Appreciate it.
Just to point out, the memorandum that was submitted does actually identify financial institutions as one of the uses that they want to make a special use. And perhaps, and I agree with Commissioner Ford, if there is a motion to table this particular proposal, I'd be in favor of tabling it. But maybe it could just be limited to financial institutions.
Maybe it should go back to the committee
Yeah.
for further study. I thank you for your comments and also what you've done in the neighborhood. I was there last week, very pleased to be able to buy gelato down the street from you. I watched it go from when I was a kid, and I could get spaghetti right near there, and it was pretty busy, to emptiness. And now there's
Coming back.
stuff coming back.
Yeah.
It's nice to see what's happened. So thank you, but especially thank you for your comments. They're useful. Is there a motion? I'm asking for that because I think you guys have been pretty clear about why you would refer it back or.
Okay, I'm in the profession of making motions. I'll move that we return this to the zoning committee.
Seconded.
All those in favor? And if you guys could nod so we know if it's unanimous. All those in favor on this
Aye.
side?
Aye.
It's unanimously passed. Is there any other business?
You don't want to stay for urban gardens? You have an urban garden in one of your properties? All right.
About this?
Just kidding. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the urban farm, rooftop farm text amendment. It's actually 14 PLMD 0059. And does the staff wish to enlighten us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a presentation. It's relatively quick. As you might remember, this particular type of land use definition and its regulations was presented to the both zoning committee and the plan commission back in 2012. And you might have seen a lot of these over the course of the last few years. I mean, what we're trying to do is, as these new uses are established and they become known, we try to introduce them to the zoning ordinance and classify them into the zoning districts. So you've seen bed and breakfast establishments, business and vocational schools, aquaponics, or these neighborhood and rooftop gardens. So I do anticipate that we will come forward probably with something such as yoga studios or specialty gyms that no longer look like a typical gym that we've seen in the past. So unfortunately, the ordinance was written a long time ago and it does not include a lot of these uses, and therefore we have to introduce some of these new uses that are more current. So as I mentioned, this particular text amendment was presented to the zoning committee in 2012 on 2 occasions, in July and August of 2012, and then ultimately to the plan commission in September of 2012. The Plan Commission made a positive recommendation to the City Council. However, the text amendment was never presented to the City Council for a number of reasons, which I'm honestly not very familiar with, probably for the lack of substantial proposals from the area. We do currently allow neighborhood garden plots as an accessory use to another principal use on the property. So a school or a park that you might have seen at James Park, we do have these garden plots, and those are considered accessory uses. So this proposed amendment is for a principal use on a vacant lot, or like an urban farm within a vacant facility or something like that. We are not proposing any changes to the text amendment from what was established and discussed and ultimately recommended for approval by the Plan Commission back in 2012. This definition for neighborhood garden stays the same. It's a principal use that provides space for people to grow plants for non-commercial purposes, such as beautification, education, recreation, or harvest, and is managed by a specific person or group responsible for maintenance and operations subject to the regulations indicated on the slide. Those were discussed at the time, and we're just keeping the same regulations about that we have to identify who's going to be managing that on-site processing for the neighborhood gardens per se is not allowed. The outdoor storage of any kind is prohibited. We would allow a fence and one accessory structure on that particular lot. It's usually for garden supplies, that kind of materials. Composting only plant material is allowed, but not in the required front yard. And then incidental sales of plants and produce would be permitted, such as at the neighborhood markets and fresh markets, et cetera. And we are developing, it's a permit form that was included in the packet where the applicant would have to obtain that permit, make sure they have approval from the property owner. They specify the type of water usage, how that's going to be managed, how much water is going to be used. So those thoughts are done well in advance. We are proposing to allow neighborhood gardens as a by right permitted use in the R districts and in the B districts. So there'll be another one of those allowed uses. Commercial districts, the industrial I and M districts, Research Park, and then the O1 district. Downtown, we feel that this type of use is more appropriate as a special use, where the Plan Commission and the City Council can evaluate that proposal based on its proximity to surrounding uses and just the nature of the proposed use. And as I mentioned, currently it's allowed only as an accessory use. So in similar fashion for urban farms, we are not making any changes to the previous proposal. These are now more of a commercial scale uses. So urban farm would take place in the ground or within a facility, whereas the rooftop farm is basically for the rooftop area of the building where they would bring soil or plots, and et cetera. So we are proposing to add urban farms and rooftop urban farms only as special uses, because these types of uses really vary, similar to aquaponics, based on their setup, if it's indoor or outdoor, what type of materials and even plant materials they're going to use, how are they going to process, how materials will be brought in, how it's going to be picked up. So there's a number of different issues that we feel can be addressed through the special use process, and therefore we're recommending that the urban farms are allowed in the industrial districts, whereas the rooftop farms in a little bit more of a districts, but also only as a special use. And I believe that sort of wraps up my presentation. We do believe that they meet the standards for approval. These types of uses are consistent with the general comprehensive plan that calls for initiatives to promote healthy environment and high quality of life, and then the awareness of the environmental issues. There's also a benefit of the fact that some of this produce that is produced in these neighborhood gardens and urban farms is usually consumed within a close proximity where they're grown. So the residents of Evanston are going to benefit from that. So we do believe that standards for approval outlined in 6345 have been satisfied, and therefore staff recommends Plan Commission make a positive recommendation for this.
Is there discussion or comments?
I have a comment, and it may be a rare circumstance, and it may not. With regard to neighborhood gardens, one of the particular uses that's identified is school and education purposes. So the issue I wanted to at least have staff consider, or maybe even the commission consider, my first experience with an urban garden was actually through the success that a school had with an urban garden. And the school had a program to teach farming, but it also, as part of its program, taught, the skill of selling the produce. And it wasn't to really make, money, like a profit, but basically whatever they made, they were able to use it for the school. I just wonder, and it was a school in the city of Chicago, I wonder, do we really want to restrict a school? Say, for example, if the high school has a urban garden program, and part of that program is teaching agriculture, gardening, and another part of the program is teaching business, and the students basically run and operate it. Now they're doing it and they're raising funds that will be used for the schools, or for their school, or for whatever kind of purpose. And under the neighborhood garden, again, it's a rare situation, but it may be something that would come up, and I wonder, do we want to restrict schools to being able to grow and to sell?
Let me just ask you, as a zoning expert.
No, I'm a practitioner.
You can't
not an
deny
expert.
it. Well, you could. If it was on the school grounds, then it would be part of a school program, and I'm not sure from a zoning perspective it would be prohibited. If it was on a separate site, then it would be subject to this regulation. At least that's how I would see it, and you would be familiar with this.
Okay. Well, and that's the reason why maybe I raised it, because I don't know if Mr. Munzer worked on it, but it was during the time that he was with the city, and it was, we had to, or someone from my office actually dealt with the zoning issue on that. I worked on another issue on it, but I know that it was an issue that had to be overcome.
We had, when this came before us, we had a member who was moved away, who was adamant that there should not be any sales. And that's how it came into the ordinance.
Well, I would think that if a school were to establish the program, I live across the street from Willard School, and there's an awful lot of land there that they could be farming. I'm not sure that I want to see a farm stand on the corner across the street from me, but I would think you might, if you want to do the business aspect of it, encourage the students to set up at farmers market and sell that way, and just do the farming on the site. Because I think you're right. Combining those two as an educational thing makes a lot of sense.
And that would be allowed, just to clarify. For a neighborhood garden, the definition says incidental sales are permitted. So a neighborhood garden,
But not on site.
correct, off-site at a farmer's market.
Okay, like farmers market.
Correct. So if it's done, the whole thing is for educational purposes, and students learn how to do raising funds and business aspect of that, that would be definitely allowed.
Can you take the slide back to the districts? Andrew, and I'm going to butcher pronunciation, McGonigal maybe, was here for a few minutes before the meeting, and as he sat down next to me, informed me that he had contagious bronchitis.
Oh, dear.
And then coughed. So he's not here, but he comes wearing a hat as representative from Northwestern, and other times representing Andrew. And he looked at this and said he thought in the proposed regulations that the university and transition district should be included in the cell of permitted uses, and maybe the research park should be included in the special use category. And I think there might be some university, some property in the university district, which might be separate parcel, where this would be appropriate. I see no reason not to add a university and transition district into the permitted use side. And I think for the research park, if there's land available, the special use treatment would be appropriate. So he said to me, "Why not?" And I couldn't answer.
Regarding the research park, we definitely agree. There has been an effort to rezone the research park. Staff is working on that, and it's probably going to become some form of downtown classification. So to move RP to special uses, I think staff would have no opposition to that.
What about the university area? Apparently, they have some
They have the garden.
gardens now, and they're using it for teaching purposes in part, and some of it they're not, and some of it people are just growing vegetables.
Yeah, if obviously if it is on a lot there's a principal use on there, such as a different building or whatever, it will be considered accessory, and then it is permitted as it is right now. If they feel that we should include university and and transitional university districts, then we can certainly look at that, and then ultimately Planning and Development Committee and the City Council can ultimately decide that.
So if no one objects, I think that would make some sense. Now I'm taking off my Andrew hat, but I wanted to share that. Any comments? So we have no one in the audience today at this point, so I can't make a mistake and forget to ask them. How do you wish to proceed?
I move to amend portions of the zoning ordinance to create urban farm and neighborhood garden use.
And
Is that correct?
And are you not including the,
No,
or including
including the,
the university and transitional district?
yes, yes. Thank you.
And what about the research park before it gets changed as a
Yes.
special use? There is a motion. Is there a second? Is there discussion? Mr. Steele?
Yeah, there's a question. I think from Mr. Latonovich, I think the city is comfortable with the research. The city is comfortable with including the research areas, right? But I think he did have reservation with including other university facilities, right?
I would not call them reservations. I would just state that we tried to mimic the proposal that was presented and approved by the Plan Commission in 2012, and that's what's presented tonight. And it does not include university and transition, so I don't know what type of discussions were taken at that time.
I think it just wasn't considered. Everyone forgot that we had a university district.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember it being addressed either by staff or anyone else. And Andrew didn't come forward, so that's how it came to be. Other comments or questions? I don't remember. Was there a second? Yes, there was a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no indication of discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
I vote aye. And so we have one, Mr. Steele has abstained, and the other members have voted in favor of the recommendation. The standard is whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, and the staff has addressed that. The other standards are not applicable to this motion because we have no specific location. Is there any other business that anyone wishes to raise? Hearing no new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show it's 8:40. This is an efficient commission.
Nicely